What is going on? Hello, Joan. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I am. This is Brian. Hi, Brian.
This is Brian. Welcome.
Thank you.
We're just getting started. You're the first in the door. Helen is coming in the door. I don't think you can see who's in the waiting room, so I'm just sort of narrating that.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Hello, Helen. Hopefully you're hearing me. You're just getting connected.
Hello, Brian. Helen joined.
Hi, Helen.
Hi,
How are
Helen.
you today? Hello, Joan.
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
So Colin is coming in. I am doing a recording, so if other people join us, we'll be able to catch up. Hi, Colin.
Hi.
I saw that you had joined earlier. I wasn't sure how you saw the information, if it was on the listserv or on the Slack. So,
It was the email list.
okay.
You had said 2 p.m., so I went to the link to see what time Zoom told me.
Oh,
and
I
of course,
see.
Zoom told me 12 p.m. So I just needed to know what time it was. This is just a quick way to find out the right time.
Yeah. I'm still learning. I mean, there's so many people now that are in different time zones, especially in the xAPI cohort. We've also connected to some of the LiveCode lists, and there's a number of people that are coming in from all over the world because of that. So it's a challenge to manage a diverse group like this, but it's fun.
Yeah. I was, until just over 2 years ago, I was in Brooklyn, so I would have been in the same time zone, but now I'm in Colorado.
Oh, okay. Bit of a change, I imagine.
Yeah. Nicer view of the mountains.
Oh, I bet.
In Brooklyn.
Colorado is beautiful. Has a beautiful view. I'm sure Brooklyn has some unique sights, but I'm not sure people would call it a beautiful view.
You're Detroit, aren't you?
I'm near Detroit. I'm in Plymouth.
Right.
What about Helen and Joan? Where are you guys at?
I'm actually a neighbor of Colin. I'm in New Mexico.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
So you're north.
Which part of New Mexico? Not that I've ever been there, but which city?
In central New Mexico, in a town called Los Lunas. It's about an hour and a half south of Albuquerque. Very dry.
For a while, I was looking at, gosh, I'm forgetting the name of it. What's the equally famous city, not counting Albuquerque? Santa Fe.
Santa Fe.
So I was looking at Santa Fe for a while as somewhere that I might want to end up at. But then I moved to work for a particular company in Boulder, in Colorado.
That's a beautiful area.
Well, I'm in North Carolina, in Durham, but I work for a university in Seattle, where I used to live, Seattle, Washington.
Oh, that's interesting.
Really? That's challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I worked at the University of Washington, and I started back in 2011. And the center where I worked didn't get renewed funding in 2015, so I moved to North Carolina to be closer to my family in South Carolina. But I had been working either hourly or full-time, close to full-time for them since University of Washington, since I moved here. Or moved to the South, I'll say.
Right.
And then, because I was in Charlotte for a while, and then I moved up to Durham because there are more universities here, and I'm tired of working from home. I've been doing that for 6 years. And I wanted to have an office to go to. I moved to Durham a week before. I guess I should turn my video on. I moved to Durham a week before we went on lockdown. So I don't know anybody here.
Yeah, understood.
There's no office to go to anyway. So.
Yep. Martin's coming in.
That's my story.
That's a beautiful area.
Yeah, actually, you guys are sort of jumping into what I wanted to do. Just by way of introductions, is sort of do a round robin and get at some of the details. We've shared some of it, but I'll just go through this and we can continue on. Martin is joining us as well, so we'll sort of take the reins. But for the introductions, we've already sort of talked around it, but your name, your location, time zone, and then give us a little details about your xAPI experience. Or if you're new to the xAPI cohort, that is not an issue. It's just, what are you looking to get out of it? What are you hoping to learn? Same thing with LiveCode. Our project team is sort of focused on using LiveCode. So if you're new to that, that's just fine. And if you want to tell us you want to get familiar with it, that'll be fine as well. So, Colin, if you don't mind, I'll put you on the bubble.
All right. So what's the first question? I'm Colin Holgate. It probably says that if you roll over my icon. Yep. I'm in Boulder, in Colorado, so it's 12:05 lunchtime for me. You better tell me what xAPI is.
Aha. So you came to us from the LiveCode list. We're actually also working with a group called the xAPI cohort. And xAPI is the experience API. What they're doing is they're adopting a new standard that helps to capture learning wherever it happens. In the past, through a standard called SCORM, learning has happened inside an LMS, and somebody had to be a member of an LMS. And an LMS is a big enterprise solution. So usually if you work for a big company like Coca-Cola would have their LMS. But if you went to work for Pepsi, if you went to another company, all your learning history would be trapped inside your previous employer. One of the big goals of xAPI is to make that information more independent and to make it so you can have a copy of it, but it's also stored out there in an authoritative location to where your new employer can say, do you have training records we can look at? You can share some information of how they see them, and they are not sort of trusting you, like you would give them a spreadsheet saying all the history that you've had and all the degrees that you've had. They're actually going out to this independent resource and able to validate the training records that appear. So that is the very short synopsis, but we're working hand in hand with this xAPI cohort. You can sign up for it at xAPIcohort.com if you're interested in following along in more detail. And that's more than likely where both Helen and Joan are coming from.
Mm. Okay, so to answer the question then, 0.
Okay.
I've not had any xAPI experience at all. As far as LiveCode is concerned, if you were to go back to Xtalk languages in general, I used HyperCard since October of 1987, and from February 1992 until about 1997, or perhaps a little earlier, I was working for the Voyager company, and pretty well every CD-ROM I made was done in HyperCard.
Oh wow! Okay.
And I became, obviously, I knew about LiveCode, but it was revolution.
Yeah.
And I was more active with LiveCode, mostly utilities and other in-house kinds of things. But I did write a book on developing mobile apps in LiveCode as well.
I think I purchased it.
Well, thank you. And even just last weekend, I was using LiveCode a lot to analyze. I had 16,400 text files. I wanted to find out things they had in common, and I used LiveCode for that. So just ongoing use, and what mostly is as a utility for processing data.
Okay. So Colin, welcome. Just to share a little bit of my background, while you were at Voyager, I was at a company called Verbum Magazine down in San Diego, and we were reviewing Voyager titles. So we were one of the first digital art magazines in the 90s.
Do you remember what titles from back then from Voyager?
That is a challenge. No, but let me think through that, if you would.
Sure.
Joan, you just went off camera. Can I hand it to you, or should we skip to Helen?
You can hand it to me.
Okay, thank you.
Joan Davis, that's my name. I'm from the University of Washington, but I live in, like I said earlier, Durham, North Carolina in the United States, and that's in the Eastern time zone. And I was in the xAPI cohort last time in the spring of 2020. Basically in observer mode, I attended many of the webinars. And between that time and now, I've been just learning xAPI on my own. We don't use it at work, but I want us to use it, but we're tied to this LMS called Canvas, and everything gets done in Canvas. And we do a little bit of storyline work now. And that's one way, of course, we can use xAPI, but we're not.
Okay.
And I have a personal interest in using xAPI from web applications. And that kind of led me, and web applications and mobile applications, and that is one reason why I would like to join this team. And that's to learn LiveCode. I'd heard of it a while back. I was looking through my email and I saw where I'd sent, I guess, email back in 2011 to somebody about LiveCode. I said, oh, I didn't know I knew of it before.
Yeah, I find myself doing that.
Cohort.
When I go back through my emails, I find myself saying, oh, I was curious about this 5 years ago. Why didn't I follow? But no, that's good. That's good.
And I used HyperCard way back in the day, and SuperCard, so I'm familiar with that approach to programming. And I used to be a software developer a long time ago. But now I kind of fiddle around in Python and a little bit in JavaScript. And I've done Devlin Peck's course on xAPI. Yeah. And I think I've read about every page on xAPI.com. So that's yeah. And fiddled around with some LRSs like Veracity, and we have tracks installed at work.
Helen, I know you've introduced yourself before. Thank you, Joan. Welcome. Let me hand it off to Helen for her to do a brief recap. This is a bit of a new group, so Helen and Martin, I'm going to ask you to, do a brief introduction yourself. And Karen, hopefully we'll have you online as well in a moment.
Sure.
Wonderful. My name is Helen Lenane. I'm an instructional designer. I live in the Mountain Time Zone, but I work in Eastern Time Zone, so I'm always doing the math. I'm adding and subtracting, like my day started 4:30 a.m. local, with things going on at work. I have limited experience with xAPI. Most of it was learned through the different cohorts. I've looked at the standards, I've looked at the statements. I feel comfortable reading JavaScript, probably could put some code together if I really had to cut and paste between different examples. About 2 years ago, I gave this really short presentation at work about this thing called xAPI. I know it had been around for a while, and I highlighted how our publishing tools could generate these xAPI statements, but they were really limited, like with Storyline and Captivate. But I mean, that was a really great place for me to start. And now my goal is to learn more about the JavaScripting to build that ecosystem, like environment, like statements coming from a website or a PDF file that populate an LRS. So I don't have experience. I would say it's really limited, but I understand what the benefits are with xAPI. So that's a little bit about myself. And I live in New Mexico. I'm from New England, so I've discovered my R's since I've been out here. But you'll wonder, what? That doesn't sound like an accent from New Mexico, but I'm working on it.
Yep.
But it's really great to have this opportunity, and Brian and the team always make people feel so welcomed, and it's a great learning experience. So thank you.
Thank you, Helen. I appreciate your kind words, and also for the ones that you put in the xAPI cohort during the live session. I wanted to thank you for that. So I'm glad you feel welcome. I mean, that's part of it is sort of to build this diverse team and get people interested and see that we have a lot to learn from each other. Colin's already saying he wants to learn about xAPI, and we have a bunch of people here who are doing that learning, but also wanting to learn about LiveCode. So I'm glad to hear all that. Karen, are you able to speak?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. I just meant some people check in and they're in another meeting. So.
Oh yeah, no, I am able. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Karen LeBenz. I am in New Jersey, Southern New Jersey, Mount Laurel, and that's the Eastern Time Zone. And I have just started. Actually, when I first joined the meeting, I heard HyperCard and I laughed because I was into HyperCard and SuperCard and all that back then. And then when Helen started to speak, a lot of exactly what she was saying was part of my experience and what I want to learn. I took Devlin Peck's tutorials and I connected Storyline with the Learning Record Store, and that all worked. So I have some programming experience, but I'm not a programmer. But I do enjoy hunting around code and finding out how it works and stuff like that. So I have no LiveCode experience at all. I don't even think I know what it is. So that's me. I'm an instructional designer, by the way, e-learning developer.
Okay, good. How about Martin? Do you have a moment?
Yep. 3 minutes. Yeah, so my background is HyperCard as well. I just went and got my lovely.
Nice.
I still have all my books and everything, my manuals and stuff. So
That's awesome.
From way back, and I used HyperCard to develop a way to record people signing and then see themselves signing, kind of like a language lab. So I had to use AppleScript to connect to another program to do the recording, but HyperCard played it back. And then when HyperCard got killed, I sort of gave up on that, and then a few years later discovered LiveCode and imported the HyperCard stacks right into LiveCode and kept going from there. As far as xAPI, I had read about SCORM and thought this would be interesting as a way to, take that information and put it into learning management system. Didn't find it really compelling as to what you could do with it, and then I found out about Tin Can, and I thought, okay, that's what I need. But then I couldn't find much information on it, and then last year, so I sort of abandoned that idea, and then last year Brian invited me to xAPI cohort, and so that was my first thing this fall 2020, and got involved with a group Team Zoom that did some neat things with having Zoom send off data, and a JavaScript application would take that and see how long people were in the meeting, how much they spoke during the meeting, whatever, and then created xAPI statements. So that was my first exposure. So I'm just beginning to get a handle on it and looking forward to this session to learn more about it. I haven't yet done all the tutorials that people have mentioned, but I just saw him yesterday, or when it was, or I don't know if it was him or it was mentioned. But anyways, I plan to hunt that down and go over that too to get better chops in xAPI.
Okay.
Oh, and I'm from Toronto, Eastern Time Zone.
So again,
all the questions.
Martin, welcome.
Thank you.
So thank you all for introducing yourself. I'm going to sort of traipse us through some of the slides that I've put together, and this will cover some of the generic information about xAPI and even reach into LiveCode. I've got an example that we can walk through. One of the things I sort of want to start off with is xAPI in general is referring to the statements that are being sent to store information. But one of the references I found is the xAPI technical guide for implementers, and we can put a link in the chat for that in a few minutes. But it talks about there being 3 core technologies. And so I sort of want to start off with this as a baseline. And the idea, we've sort of touched on the idea of a learning record store. People are saying that it can complement, if not completely replace, an LMS. And it really depends on the tool that the vendor has implemented. Because there are companies now that are coming out with what is marketed as an LRS that also has some LMS capabilities. So the idea, the key differentiator is an LMS can host a course. You can publish files to it. But LRSs is where the statements are sent to. So if we sort of backtrack through this path, xAPI statements come to the LRS from what is referred to as a LRP, or Learning Record Provider. And that can be an application on a website. It can be a course stored in an LMS that is either published through Storyline or Adobe Captivate or some of the other, authoring tools that are available to us. And the xAPI code can be added to a SCORM package or added to a course package that is then hosted, and that hosting becomes an LRP. The point is the LRP is not necessarily a standalone product. It can be adapted into what you're already using, into a website or into like a SharePoint or even an Excel file. People are working within the xAPI cohort on different projects showing how different devices and projects can send these statements. And then the third component that is hinted at but hasn't really been, from my perspective, hasn't really been elaborated on too well, is the learning record consumer. And the reason I say it's been hinted at is there are products like Veracity is a good example that is marketed as an LRS that has some features of a consumer as well. And the idea is Veracity as an LRS can store the learning records as it receives them, but it can also query those records and show you a graph or run a report. But an LRC can also be a standalone application or another website. The other thing I've heard mentioned are IT tools for business information, so business information systems or analytics. I've heard them called a data warehouse or a data lake, or there's a number of buzzwords around those things that they can actually be adopted and used as a learning record consumer because code can be written to existing programs, code can be written to projects, and they can become an LRC. Martin has a comment? Go ahead, Martin.
I'm just wondering, is an LMS then a learning record consumer? Like if an LMS is getting things from the LRS?
If it's being set up to pull data from an LRS, it is acting as a learning record consumer.
Okay.
So one of the challenges is in the world of business and marketing, people want to sell their product. Some of them will say that their singular product can do all of these things. So one of the key points to know is the ADL, which is the sponsoring organization behind xAPI. The ADL has published criteria to evaluate how a learning record store, just the middle object, the LRS, will perform. And they actually evaluate and validate conformance to that criteria. So they have a very short list of LRSs that are what they call conformant. They have a very long list of organizations who have put their hand up and say, we want to use this. But that is a very short hurdle to be called an adopter. Just putting your hand up and saying, I want to use this is enough. And I actually have within the state of Michigan an LLC, and I've registered myself as an adopter. So there's not very much to do other than fill out a web form to become an adopter. It's a whole nother major step to go through conformance testing and actually show up on that short list of conformant learning record stores. The challenge there is they haven't come out with the same level of criteria for a consumer or for a provider. They have done that for the LRS. Martin, your hand's still up?
Oh,
is there more? Okay. Any questions before I go on in a little more detail? This can be a little more dynamic. I don't mean it to be a lecture, but if you have questions, go ahead and jump in. Take us on to the next slide. So one of the other things I talk about is CMI5 is emerging as on one hand, it's emerging as a standard, but it is also considered to be an xAPI profile in that it is a subset of all of xAPI. One of the things I point to down in the lower left is I went through the exercise of pulling vocabulary from a database that the ADL publishes on a website. And again, we can give you a link to that. That lists all of the verbs that are available, all of the keywords that are available. And I came up with over 800 entries. So that indicates there's more than 800 registered keywords that can be used for xAPI. As a profile, to start with CMI5, there's 9 keywords. So the idea is a profile is a very focused subset for someone who wants to do a specific task with xAPI. And the idea is that the goal is that CMI5 will become a course publication standard for the known applications such as Captivate and Storyline that once they can publish to a CMI format, a CMI5 format, that could be uploaded to an LMS, and that format would then be xAPI compliant. But it's the point I'm making here is to do that, it only takes these 9 or 10 words in the vocabulary for CMI5. There are also similar profiles for handling video and for other specialties within xAPI. So let me backtrack a slide and ask if there's any questions on that before I move on. Hello, Henry. I see you're just connecting. I'm not sure if that was Henry or not. Oh, it sounds like it was. Okay, he's muted.
He's there, yeah. He's just gotten the phone call
Yep.
right when he was connecting.
So, Henry, we're just catching up. We've got a few newer members, so we're just catching them up with the slides, and we'll get into some demos in a moment. So, again, are there any questions on the idea of profiles and them being a subset of the whole of xAPI? So I'm going to talk through this detail here on the next slide. So one of the projects I led 2 cohorts ago was a project to use a device called the Makey to connect this joystick and arcade style button layout through LiveCode and have it act as a learning record provider. And this sort of shows you the path that we took and the architecture that we used. So the architecture behind the scenes is we had a web server running HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, connecting to a couple JavaScript libraries, and the libraries were actually what acted as the learning record provider, sending the statements to the LRS. So I'm not sure if my images, if the team images were over the LRS image there, but I just collapsed that. So to backtrack through this, we set up an application within LiveCode, and it talked to the Makey device. I'm sorry, I sort of got distracted. I just got a warning that we've got 10 minutes, so I need to sort of focus on what I'm doing here. So we use this joystick and keyboard layout to talk to the Makey. It talked to the application we built in LiveCode, which then interacted with our web server and sent a statement each time a button was pushed. And the idea was that someone who was unable to use the keyboard might be able to use this as an alternative input device. And it really was just a concept, a proof of concept. But the idea is that the LiveCode was interacting with this environment to build the statement and send that to the LRS. So in this sense, Team Makey built a learning record provider. It's made up of web technologies, HTML5, CSS, JavaScript, and the libraries, a LiveCode application, Makey, which is actually a little printed circuit board, it's a hardware device, and then the learner response board, or learner response device. And I showed you the arcade joystick. We had an early prototype that was a ping pong ball board we referred to. We literally made it with some supplies from Home Depot and aluminum foil and taped it together. It unfortunately has not sort of passed the test of time. It hasn't survived very well. So I tend to use the other one as the example. And then some of the other options might be a Monogram Creative Console or Raspberry Pi. We haven't really touched on that. And then in these next slides, I go into detail about the web server. I don't think we really need to jump into that right now. So I'm going to stop share. We have under 8 minutes. I need to build us another meeting unless somebody has a commercial Zoom account and could build a meeting for us that would last longer than 40 minutes.
Actually, Brian, you can just, everyone gets booted out, but you can just use the same link and jump back in, and then go another 40 minutes, I think. I've done that before, and it seems to work.
Okay.
We can try it, and if nobody shows up, then we can.
Well,
then you can
the
send out a
challenge
new,
will be to communicate with this group if that doesn't work.
Oh, okay.
So if that, I'm willing to try that, but let me go ahead and set up another one.
Okay. Oh, and then post it on like
Yeah,
chat.
and I can put it in chat.
Yeah, that's probably the best way. Sorry.
So I'm gonna hit schedule.
I just put the link to the makey stuff. It's kind of neat.
Yeah, I'm realizing now that I should have a note set aside with the links I keep referring to
Yeah.
for when I do this.
And there should be videos of your presentations from before, right?
Yes, but that's another link I need to share. So Martin has shared the makey source page, and then I'll put the information for the Zoom meeting. So everybody take a moment and copy the Zoom information. Henry, are you hearing us now, or are you still on the phone? Okay. So does anyone have any questions or concerns?
I have a question.
Okay.
In the diagram you showed the makey board and LiveCode, and then the web server. Did you have to use the LiveCode? Did you have to use LiveCode because the makey board couldn't connect to the server? I was just trying to figure out what did the LiveCode code do.
So yes, the
Or you didn't get
LiveCode
that.
the LiveCode received the message from the makey board
Mhm.
and sent it on. But the goal there is similar to what we're doing now. I wanted to build a LiveCode project that could act as this learning record provider, and we're sort of taking a next step with that. Today I can show you another step beyond that isn't talking to the makey. So that example was sort of past tense, and now I've got an example that's a little more current and we can get into the detail on that during the next meeting session, if that helps.
Oh yeah, I was just curious if the makey board could send statements directly to a LRS, or if you had to use
it can send a message to whatever the current application is on your desktop. And in this case, we literally could, and I have just pulled the website up and sent it directly from the makey to the web browser.
Oh, okay.
But what I was working to do was use LiveCode to talk between the two of them.
I see.
And that way, as a LiveCode project, now we can look at, okay, how can we use a LiveCode project to say, Martin's use case is he wants somebody to interact with a video. So he wants to know if they stop, or if they jump forward, or they pause or rewind. He actually has an application where they're tracking moments in time, and he can explain this much better than I do, but for American Sign Language, they have one video of the person speaking and another video of the person signing. So they are actually combining two timelines in a sense, where they're saying the person said this then, but it's not signed at the same time on the same video. It's signed in a different URL space. So he's having to have a more complex interaction. And what part of what our project is, this cycle of the xAPI cohort, is to get that baseline as a common starting point for people.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And if I can add, Brian?
Yep. Go ahead.
I think with the makey, it was LiveCode was the interface between the makey board, but then it had to connect to a server with JavaScript, and then JavaScript, so it would send off a message off to the server, and then the server would create the xAPI statement. And one of the things we're talking about is having just LiveCode do that because LiveCode can send off messages. to servers can do that. So could we, how much work would it be so that LiveCode could do it all within itself, so that you could have like a test or a interactive thing that you've created with LiveCode, and it being an easier language to get into and to start using, it'd be easier to do that for an instructor than to learn how to script or learn how to write Python to be able to create an application that they would need to do it.
So at this point, I want to transition us. Let's go ahead and try, like Martin suggested, closing out this meeting and signing back into the same URL. But if that does not work, you should go into the chat now and copy session number 2 Zoom meeting that I pasted in there. And again, we're going to try the same meeting space that we're in. And if that doesn't work, then we'll go to the session number 2 that I just published. Can I get a thumbs up? Does everybody have that? Oh. Helen, Karen, verbally, hopefully you're following along?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Yes, thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and end this session. I'm hoping to see everybody right back. Colin,
Okay.
you as well? Okay, thanks. So I should be able to go to the web browser. And it won't let me just join right into it. It's in the calendar. It's in the calendar.
Both links showed a message saying waiting for the host to start the meeting. So I think that the existing link would have worked.
So you came in through the second link?
Well, I kept on toggling between the two of them, and both were saying waiting for the host. And I think I came in with the second link. Henry could tell us.
Second link as well.
Right.
And this isn't to say the first link was not going to work. It's just that meeting had not been started.
I think what Martin pointed out was that when I build a link, it's personal to me. Because what I did was I actually went back to the calendar and clicked on the link for the first meeting, and it brought me in, and you've all joined through the second link to the same one that I'm in. So it's all personal to me.
There you go. So no problem. Either link probably would have worked then.
So hopefully we'll be able to get Karen and
Joan Davis.
Joan and Martin back in. So Henry,
yeah.
Can you do a quick intro to yourself? We've got a couple new members, and we did go around and do that before you were able to join.
Sure. Should I wait for other people to come on?
Sure. Yeah, Joan and Martin are just coming in now.
Yeah. So Brian, one of the things years ago we did a project for AT&T. They were creating kiosks to using was it ISDN at the time to do video conferencing and like your makey, which sends some primitive messages. So we had a challenge where we were using the little things you see in the houses or offices, a little infrared motion detector. So we created a contraption that was that little motion detector, which if you powered was just opening and closing a switch. And then we didn't have a makey, so we went over to the local store and bought a pallet of keyboards, and then soldered the switch so it was sending a tilde key to the computer, and something in the computer, like you have your app, was waking up and saying, I got a tilde through the keystroke and I'm going to do something with it. Just a little anecdotal history.
That's awesome. So yeah, I think everybody's on. Henry, if you want to
sure.
do
So
a quick profile.
My name's Henry Ryng, and I'm an e-learning holic or something. I don't know. So my career I'm an electrical engineer, self-taught software. After college, I went to work for a flight simulator company, so I was in and around like technology-based training for quite a while. And then I had a career where I was working for some like defense contractors, where we were porting military training technology over to e-learning, and then some of the earlier computer-based training, which would, desktops and laser discs, and the early Apple and the IBM, the XTs that came out, and Windows 3.1, and applications like 10. I'm very much old school, but a survivalist. So now, over the years, playing with Flash and other things, and now with HTML5 and web technologies, both server-side, client-side, and have SCORM LMSs that we currently have with thousands of users on it every day, and we're playing with xAPI and CMI5, and all this stuff is interesting or fun for me in a weird way.
Well, good. Thanks for that.
That's excellent.
I'm going to go back into sharing and see if we can pick up where we left off with Joan's question. Why am I looking at this? There we go. So hopefully you're seeing some of my screen. Now I'm going to pull up. Got a couple of LiveCode apps to talk through. So Joan had asked some of the details about this one. So this is actually the Makey app. And LiveCode in general is a high-level language that allows you to switch between coding and runtime, literally by clicking these icons. So you notice the change in this web URL browser. This is actually a widget that I dragged on from the toolbar, and then I named it, and then I'm sending code to it. But right now it has a URL assigned. And so if I double click on it in the edit mode, you can see some of the details pop up in these dialog boxes. And I can go through and set different properties for it. I can lock it without realizing it, and then set, look at the code behind it. So I don't want to jump into the code right away, but that sort of pops to the front. And the other thing I want to do is talk a bit about what it looks like in runtime. It should go out and load a URL. Unless, of course, I drag it off the screen and it hides. Well, this is embarrassing. I did not check the status of my own server. So here's the page it should be pointing to, xAPI Makey Visual Index. I don't know why it's not grabbing that. That's a new one. So the Makey board down here is simulated, meaning I can click on things and have it respond. You'll notice one of the items is actually identified as a click, so if you click the mouse anywhere on these other buttons, it's also activated. But if I use the arrow keys or the letter keys over here, I can activate the different buttons. I can also use the keyboard to send a statement to the server. And I'm going to pop back to this window and simulate that. This is what you should be seeing in that window. Is I've just selected the W key, which is simulating me clicking the blue button. So I have this JavaScript that is telling me that this happened. And over here, this JSON is actually empty. It's ready to be filled with actor, verb, object. Once I click OK and the statement actually sends to the server, we get a response back that adds the ID in. It also adds in result and context. So this is an example of how the website is interacting with our learning record store. And unfortunately, my demo is going to pieces because it's not working in the demo environment. So let me try closing and removing that from memory. And that's 7-23. You hit don't save. So we're going to see if I'm working within the definition of insanity. I'm going to do the same thing a second time and hope for different results. And then the other alternative in terms of troubleshooting is looking at the script. And I don't know why this wants to jump down there. Local is default.
Try just setting the URL of the using the message box, maybe. Except the URL of the widget.
I think that's
so you're
good. It's sort of convoluted in here. Thanks, Martin. It's a web browser. It's a web URL browser. And then do I need it in quotes?
Yeah.
So you're seeing a little troubleshooting on the fly. My apologies for that. And Martin was able to save the day. So if I understand what happened correctly, I usually use a local server. The local URL here is not available, and that's what it's defaulting to, but I don't know why my remote button didn't load this. It should have, that's what this button's purpose is. It should have loaded this. But now you can see I have the same information here. The actor and the verb and the object just basically say ready, not submitted yet, or undefined. And the idea is if I have a makey connected, it would show what's happening down here. Again, I'm going to simulate it. I'll click the D button. It tells me I've selected the D key using the right black button, and it shows the ID. This is actually returned from the Learning Record Store once it acknowledges receipt of the statement. So the actor, verb, object, these are all now explorable with information. There's quite a bit of depth to some of them, but we can actually go in and see what was sent. Completion was true, but success was false, meaning they answered, but they didn't answer correctly. And we can get down into who did what. You can see a number, I mean, a level of detail. But Joan, I think I answered your question. I think we lost Joan.
She had a call she had to take.
Oh, okay.
And you were
That's always a
asking,
challenge.
one other question that came up earlier on is what LiveCode is, and somebody who knows HyperCard had asked that, and you could say that LiveCode is a cross-platform, very much enhanced version of HyperCard.
Yes.
That would be one way to look at it.
Yes. So the other thing I wanted to show, I'm going to close that project. Actually, I should have closed it and removed from memory, but too late. Is I'm also working on this second implementation, and this is also Learning Record Provider using code from the xAPI lab. They have this long form that you can fill out and submit. And what I did was I sort of said, well, why don't I parse that into a series of selections? So I need to make sure I'm ready to run here. I am having trouble with this implementation of LiveCode. On this machine, I'm not getting good reaction. I actually built this on a different machine and brought it over and did not test it. So my apologies for that. But I'm going to either have to put Zoom on the other machine or somehow demo from there. Because it is not responding. It's not even letting me select objects.
Try just quitting LiveCode totally and restarting it. I get sometimes it just freezes for, especially if you're using the latest. You might have some sort of thing that the buttons aren't responding.
Yeah, there's something about the demo gremlins that when you're trying to show this to
exactly.
people,
they sense stress.
Yep.
It's olfactory. It's got like the eye smell attachment, and as soon as I smell, then they can smell.
Yep, and it doesn't look like it captured where I loaded that from. Let's try this one. So again, here we have the form that I've built up on top of the screen. Let's turn these off. Maybe that's part of why it's jumping down there. And if I go to browse mode, we can run. And now I'm actually clicked in a form. That's a good sign. It was. Wow. Yeah, I think this this version of LiveCode that I've got installed somehow got corrupted. So I've got a few machines on my network. Why am I not seeing the one I want? There, the dual. I need to wake it up. There you go. So I'm jumping into Apple Remote Desktop, which will allow me to show you the screen of a different machine. Yeah, that's a bit of a challenge. Oh, good, you've seen it. So hopefully you're seeing LiveCode running over here on a separate machine. Give me a nod.
Yep.
Okay, good. So again, I've got the project
see,
open.
yep.
Say again, Martin?
No, I do. Sorry, I just didn't realize it was a different screen until I saw the
So
remote desktop.
it's in Remote Desktop. So this allows me to work on a separate machine, and like I said, the laptop that I'm presenting from, I'm having trouble with the LiveCode. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm having trouble with the machine on a number of fronts. I think it may have some issues. So I've actually moved this project over, and now I can show you how the interaction is. So one of the things is in this long list of options, I said, well, what would happen if I put the browser in here, resized it based on these tab objects, and said, show me show me where the actor section is, show me where the verb section is, show me where the object section is. And then Joan's coming back in. Welcome, Joan. Hopefully you're hearing us. You should be seeing us shortly. And so I just jumped into this other LiveCode project. The mouse is sort of submarine though. There we go. Okay. So if I click prefs, it's actually showing me part of this browser. And it didn't jump down to the preferences, did it? Oh, they weren't opened. My apologies. So the preferences actually appear under this tab, basic authorization. But what my goal is, this is a form on a web page external to LiveCode. What my goal is to take these objects, which are native LiveCode objects. All I've done is I've duplicated the graphic, so you can see that. You hit undo. And then I have 3 different field objects here. So I want to be able to take the data in the field objects and let somebody put in their endpoint information, their username and their password, and then use LiveCode to tell the browser to update those variables.
Oh, that's really cool. That is really cool.
And where did my project go? I've not seen that behavior before. There's always something new when you're in demo mode. So welcome, was it Colin that just came in? You were in
Kevin.
Oh, my apologies.
I thought it was Central Time.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Kevin, good to see you. So we're sort of in the middle of a quick LiveCode demo. So welcome, and we'll just sort of catch you up and then give you a chance to introduce yourself in a minute. So Joan, does this give you an understanding? So LiveCode is, in a sense, a descendant of HyperCard, which, is familiar to some people. But beyond that, it is a modern authoring environment where you can use a single central common source of code. So if I go in the object window here and look at the stack script, this is the scripts that are running. Actually, I guess I have them in the card. My apologies. And it's object-oriented, so you can have scripts at different levels. So the screen you're seeing is called a card, and I can make multiple cards to view that, to view a similar background. In this case, I'm actually using these as buttons to manipulate objects on there. So if I click on this tab set of tools, I can look at the object script for the tabs and see what the widget choices are. But now I'm realizing I actually moved that script, all of it, into the card level. So on highlight changed is asking the question, is something changed on this object? Highlight change identifies which one of these is selected. And then vTarget is a variable that I'm putting the name of that in. And then I'm looking to see, is it prefs? Is it actor? Is it verb? So all I'm doing is a series of if statements to validate which one is selected. And based on that, I execute the code that's under that. And the idea is, as we're cycling through and somebody's working in this, that object is being activated each time it's clicked on. So each time it's clicked on, it checks to see if the highlight changes, and it checks to see if it needs to run the logic. I have a breakpoint set. I'm going to turn that off so we don't get any breaks that we don't need. And then there's JavaScript down here that'll let me change the scroll value of the browser. So at this point, I'm using a single card with a browser widget. And as I click on this, and it sends a message saying the actor has been clicked. That code activates and it changes the size of the browser. So it's overlapping this button here as an example. And it is also using the JavaScript code to change the scroll to show the actor in sort of front and central. So at this point, it's very simplified. I'm using a web page within a browser, and I'm just using a little LiveCode and JavaScript to modify what is being shown on the screen. But what I started to say is this is LiveCode in general is a very full-featured authoring environment, and one of the major features of it is you can go down and set standalone application settings and then save as standalone applications from this environment. So there's lots of general settings and other details here, but the point is it's set up by default to be able to write out Macintosh applications, Windows applications, and Linux standalone applications. So those three desktop environments, and then also it can publish to iOS or Android as tablet or handheld environments. And you can see there's also an option here for HTML5, and then they have options for filing bug reports within the same screen. But the point is there's a lot of reuse and value in a development environment that lets you send out to multiple desktops as well as tablets and phones, as well as web format. So that's some of the value that those of us who've been working with LiveCode for a while have seen within LiveCode. The other thing to point out is I am actually using the LiveCode business environment. But if you go out to livecode.org, there is a LiveCode open source version that is available for download and use, and you can use the files we're generating as part of this project in the open source version without concern, meaning the code that we're generating is available to both. There are some advanced features, and one of them is HTML5. That's a purchased add-on for business and independent users. So the open source does not support that out of the box. So any questions about what I've shown or about LiveCode in general? I'm just sort of trying to use this application to give you a general overview of how interacting with it works. As I mentioned over here on the toolbar, there's a number of things that when you're in the development environment, you can drag and drop things onto the screen, and that is how they've been placed in this environment from the toolbar. Is I drag the web browser over, and then I drag the buttons over that you see here and the fields over that you see here. And this tabbed object is another object that you can drag over, as well as one of the earlier versions down here, if I remember right.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Ryng, is LiveCode supported for Windows 10? And the reason I ask is because last weekend actually, I downloaded the open source version. and free version.
Yeah.
And started doing the tutorials, and it wasn't working like I think it was supposed to work. And then I looked through the documentation, and it didn't include Windows 10 as being supported. And I don't know if I was looking at an old version of the documentation. And I'm running on Windows.
Yeah, I understand, and I don't know to answer that question off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'm used it on Windows 10, and it works. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a voice of authority. He's actually using it in production.
Okay.
I wouldn't say authority, but I get by on Windows. I'm very new to Windows, but
I wouldn't say that. Experience.
Are you using the business version or the open source?
I'm using the business version, but from what I understand, it should be the same. Like the only thing that's different with the business version is you get extra features. It's not that. So the code base should be the same.
Yeah.
So the engine that runs it. So
Off the
if
top
there's
of
problems, then maybe I can look at it, or you help out, or you can contact the support at LiveCode. But
yeah.
Okay.
what type of problems was it? Was it just not starting up, or was it not?
Oh no, it starts up, and I try to do one of the tutorials, where it guides you through different steps.
Okay.
And sometimes it would just stop, and I said, "Am I supposed to do something now?"
Oh, okay.
That kind of thing. It's not.
Yeah.
I haven't tried to build anything in it.
Okay.
And then I started looking at the documentation. Oh, well, what about Windows 10? So I may be looking at it.
They just haven't updated their documentation.
Oh.
Right.
Yeah.
So she mentioned the tutorials. If you look at the menu bar across the top, there's references for the messages that are sent, the errors that can be generated. There's a link to sample stacks, and most of these are actually links to a web page. So sample stacks or tutorials or resources. And then the other thing to look at is there's a dictionary, which is a window within the IDE that you can search. So I don't know if the dictionary would tell us anything about Windows, but one of the things I did was I looked at the standalone settings, and I'm pretty sure Windows 10 is only supporting 64-bit. So you would want to make sure you have that selected if you were trying to generate output. But this is sort of one of the final steps. It sounds to me like you were having trouble running it rather than publishing from it.
Yeah, I was just trying to do the tutorials.
Yeah.
Windows 10 ought to be able to run either of those, but you would normally want to use the 64-bit one. I'm actually going to install LiveCode in Windows 10 while we're talking, so I'll let you know how I get on.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and just one thing, like Brian's showing a fairly complex application, and the nice thing about LiveCode is it's still like HyperCard. You can still just start with a screen, drag a button, type some code in, have it put values in a field. All those things that made HyperCard so great that you could just start and all of a sudden you're developing and testing it as you go, are still exist in LiveCode. So, but once you get into developing a production application or something, then you start to have to behave like a real programmer, so-called, where you have things, organized and things with code separated into the right levels of functions. But it let you do whatever you want, and so it's fairly approachable once you to get started.
So what I've done is I've gone into LiveCode, created a new stack, and I identified that I'm looking for a landscape size iPad or tablet size landscape at 1024 by 768. And this is just a predefined window at this size. So by selecting that, I've got a sort of a window open that I can work on. And you can see if I grab down here or mouse over down here, I can freely resize this and change the size. The idea is they're just giving you a starting point. And I can go in and click on the window, make sure the window is selected. I want to use my menu up here, but I'm realizing within the remote desktop I need to come over here and say, show me the stack inspector, and that will allow me to look at and set some of the options on the stack in general. I can, give it a title, and that'll display up here when I switch to there. So if I want to name this something fancy as a file name, I can also change the title that is shown here and have the fancy file name be longer and more detailed. So the title field in this example is sort of optional. It'll use the name if nothing's there. And then the asterisk here shows changes have been made but not saved, which is pretty common. These other options along the top of this dialog let you set different properties, get into graphics and highlights and fills. And since I'm on the stack level, it will change like a background for every card on the stack. So you sort of have to be aware of the object-oriented size of it. But this is what I was looking for, in that if I grab down here and resize, I'm changing these numbers. So as I let go, it's going to update the values there. And I can either, go back and undo as long as that's the last thing I've done, or I can go back in and literally type in the values that I want it to be and hit enter, and it'll resize dynamically. So a lot of the, from my perspective, a lot of the value of working with LiveCode is that you're interacting with the objects visually as well as through code and as well as through these forms. So you're able to get some dynamic feedback as to what you're building and to how it's going to look and how it's going to be saved. I don't have anything out there yet, but let me go ahead and drag in a browser. You can see the thing sort of highlights and shows where it's going to be. And I'm just resizing this manually. And then if I go through, and I think I can find the URL property here. Here we go. So we talked about the xAPI-cohort.com. So I'm literally just typing in a URL, hitting enter. It gets highlighted, and then if I go into browse mode, it should go out and locate that URL for me, but it's behaving strangely. Just like me to run a demo again. Aha. It wasn't fully qualified. I didn't put http:// So it assumed I was pointing to a file. So you see just that quick, I have a working browser that's talking to the internet and pulling up this page of information. Well, the other thing that I've seen people ask about is, well, how do I get the code behind the browser? You can actually use JavaScript and talk to the browser, and that's what some of the other scripts that we're showing was doing. Or you can request the LiveCode go out to the URL and return the HTML into a field, and that would let you have the HTML text within a field that you can then modify and custom display what you want to change. So those are some of the techniques I'm working on for how to approach some of these projects. And again, Colin and some of the others that are on board that have the LiveCode background might want to go out and join this xAPI learning cohort to join in with us. We'll have, that way you'll get access to the Slack channel and some of the other assets that we'll be using as we move forward in the project. I also need to warn you, we're down to 4 minutes on this meeting, so we need to go through the exercise again of signing out and signing back in. But let's go, let me stop share and go back to the group and see if there's any questions or concerns. Kevin, this is probably a time for a quick 2-minute intro. Do you have details on what brought you here and what you're interested in?
I don't have enough time for 2 minutes, but you brought me here basically because I followed you. Like I was able to do a little. I jumped in on the first fall cohort, but I didn't really have the time, and things happened, So anyhow, So I really wanted to get back into it. I'm pretty raw with it. I recently retired from teaching. I had been teaching for a long time. And I actually taught a little STEM in middle school. So I got some middle school kind of, but not the kind of stuff that I really want to know. And I just want to know it. I want to learn it. And I like the kind of stuff. And then when I saw you were doing this, I really liked the way you taught. I saw you before in the fall, and I thought, well, whatever Brian's doing, I'm jumping into whatever Brian's doing. I just think you're really good. So I figured whatever it is you were doing would be a good experience.
Okay. So we are going to go through another cycle of joining the Zoom call again. And from what we were able to determine earlier, the first meeting notice that I sent out, the coordinates are sort of the same. Martin, are you able to sort of walk us through the code that you shared, maybe in the next section?
Sure.
Okay. And that's sort of what I'm thinking is we'll just continue on. We may have some people, I see notes in the chat that Helen had a call to take and came back in, and then Henry had to go, that he had to get back to work. I'm setting these up with extended time so people can come and go. And the point at this point in the cohort is it's still early on. We're just forming a team, and we want to sort of get to the same page about who we are and who's on the team, but we also want to have a shared understanding of what we're working with. So with that, unless any final comments, let's go ahead and sign out and sign back into Zoom.
Are we signing into the earlier?
Yeah,
link,
you were still signing in, but from what I could tell, the ID is really tied to me, and and I signed into the first one, and everybody else signed into the second one, and all brought us to the same room.
And indeed, Kevin would have signed in on the first one. We know he joined successfully.
Yeah.
So I think either link will work.
Yep. Thank you.
I'll see you in a minute.
So we're going to join back? Or
Yes.
We're going to come back?
We're coming back into the same room, but Zoom says we have a 40-minute limit, so it's about to boot us.
Oh, okay.
So
you'll get a window saying waiting for the host to start the meeting.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. See you shortly. Hey, Joan, when's the race? You're the first one in.
Yeah, I was late last time.
Yeah, last time was a challenge for me because I want to go to the first one, but I'm looking at the calendar that Zoom gives you, and they don't give you the option to go to the one you started a half an hour ago. I had to go back to my own calendar and say, oh, yeah, it's out there still. Welcome back, Kevin.
All right.
So we should have a few more joining us. So where are you located, Kevin?
I'm right outside Philadelphia.
Okay. So Eastern time zone for you as well.
Yeah, I saw Detroit, so I thought, oh, that's probably Central.
No, not quite.
Yeah, no. How about yourself? Are you Detroit?
I'm just outside of Detroit, Plymouth.
Okay. Yeah, so it's nice and warm up there as well.
Yeah, single-digit one.
How about you, Joan?
I'm in North Carolina.
Oh, all right.
Jerome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How cold's it been?
Oh, that's nice.
Early 30s, lower 30s, but we'll be back in the 50s and 60s next week.
That's pretty cold for there.
Yeah. Helen, you made it back. Colin,
Yes.
back.
So I used the second link. The first link didn't work for me, but the second link did.
One interesting thing was that it came up with a message saying that you still had another meeting running, and I'm wondering if you have to reconnect after the 40 minutes are up, and if we were like overlapping with the previous meeting, it may have failed for that reason. I'm actually not sure which of the links I got in, but we know that Kevin used the first link because he never saw the second link.
Okay.
Okay, with that in mind, I'm going to pop out to Zoom and throw the second link. Okay, how do I do that? Zoom calendar. I'm in Zoom, so I need to see the calendar. There we go. Okay. Copy invitation. Martin made it.
Hi there, sorry.
That's all right. We were just told the first link didn't work this time because I signed into the second meeting.
Okay.
So I'm thinking I'm going to go out to Slack and update.
Okay.
Brian, thank you for facilitating and setting these Zoom sessions up. We really appreciate that.
Mm. No, he's really been sort of the instigator of all of this. It keeps drawing people in. And
Yes.
He's good.
I appreciate it, Helen, Martin. Part of it is I'm excited about it and I want to get things done with it. Kevin was sort of saying the same thing. It's like, I'm seeing, I want to make progress with this, and you're seeing what I'm trying to do, but I'm learning from everybody around me. So I'm finding that it's a challenge to coordinate because we're reaching out to the Use LiveCode group and out to the xAPI cohort, and there's a couple other places that we're communicating, but once we get everybody into the same room, there's a lot to learn from everybody. So it's definitely worth it for me.
I did install LiveCode in Windows 10 in the meantime.
Do you want to share what you see?
I was able to just start a stack and make a browser and load up a web page, the things you were showing. So Joan, if you can think of anything you tried that you don't remember working, I can give it a try as well.
Yeah, it was just when I started, it says, do you want to, like, a guided tutorial? It was that, not the actual app. I didn't do much.
Yes, so this tutorial is hard to get out of. There's a little stop button in the top right.
The guided one.
I just let it run for a couple of seconds and I quit it and just tried the regular features.
Okay.
The guided one is actually programmed to where it's controlling your machine and controlling LiveCode from within another LiveCode stack. So it's a bit complex in that it's trying to run this tour and then stop and let you do things and then go back in the tour mode. So there may be some glitches with newer operating systems and newer LiveCode updates that we're finding
it was the community one I downloaded as well, so I didn't get the indie or the business ones.
Okay, so I'm ready to go if you want, Brian.
Yep. I was just going to wrap up by saying, Joan, when I was showing my screen earlier, the icons up top, you could see there were links to graphic or to web pages that had I'm sorry, let me look at the other screen that's just going to sleep. Sample stacks, tutorials, resources, and directory. The tutorials link will take you to a web page where they have written instructions you can follow on a web page. And you may, if you're having trouble getting the animated tutorial to work, you may be able to work through those without trouble.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Martin.
Okay. Go ahead, sharing.
Oh, I got to turn it on for you. My apologies.
Okay. No problem.
Now go ahead, Mark.
Okay, thank you. Let's talk then. Okay, I'm just gonna get this scene here. Okay, I'll start with just showing you this stack that I was working on before. It wasn't necessarily to create xAPI statements. It was an attempt to connect to an LMS site using LTI, and that's learning technology interoperability. Is sort of a standard that's supposed to be, if your app can, or your website follows these standards, then it should be able to hook up with any of the big LMSs that support this, so like Canvas, Brightspace, whatever. So this is one of my steps. I haven't finished it, but it's just sort of a work in progress, but it at least it shows how I did the LiveCode, and it's just a few simple steps. So, and then I can back out of this and show you sort of the complex part of it. But, and so for some reason right now, this is my, oh, now it's working. When I click this, I get the pointer tool. So this is when I can edit this. And I'm going to select this button just to show you what's going on when it resets. So I can edit the script of any object here. And so in LiveCode, I have a handler, so it says on mouse up. It will pass the button number, but I'm not going to use it right now. So this is a parameter that gets passed. So if I use the right or the left button, and then it says reset off two values. So this is a handler. If I want to see that in LiveCode, I just right click on it and it says go to definition. So I go to the definition, and so here's the handler. And so it says, and so this is in the stack. So the button sits on the top, and then there's a card, and then there's a stack. So if I click mouse up, it travels to, or if I click mouse up, it says reset OAuth two values. And then if that message travels down, the card doesn't have anything to handle it, the stack has something to handle it, so it runs that handle. And so all this does is, this is a variable, a k base URL into field host of this card. So on the card we're on, there's a field host. I'm going to go back to the window. So Brian was showing you the property inspector. So that shows there's a field host. The name, and so I've got field port, a field app ID, app key, all those kinds of things. So I just have to identify which, so I say field host of this card. So it's very English-like, so that's what's one of the things that makes it approachable. And this k-base URL is, I've identified it as a constant. And so, and it's just URL for Brightspace. For, it's actually, what do you call it? Like a sandbox subdomain of Brightspace. So just clicking on this goes through all of these things. And if I do a breakpoint, Brian was talking about a breakpoint, I go back to the window. And if I had typed things into there, So I set the off. It jumps down to set OAuth 2 values. I can see where that came from. I can say, okay, that was in button reset on line 2. So I can see that that's where that command is called. And I can step through the code, so it cuts that into the host. It cuts 2 quotes together, it's just empty. So it's put nothing into API-ID, cuts nothing into, it cuts empty, as it's referred to in LiveCode, app key, user key, and then it's done. So that's just basically a quick overview of how, and then I've got to run it so that it finishes the script. So just a basic overview of how the messaging system works in LiveCode. Okay, now this does nothing interesting. The point of this would be, if you had an account with this, you create an application within Brightspace, and when you do that, you get an app ID and an app key. So you have to enter those here, and then you also have your user ID and your user key. And then once you've set all these up, I go to a new card called Create Requests, which isn't working. Oh, I know why it's not working. This is so another feature, and I'm just going to show you of LiveCode, is the project browser. So this shows you all the pieces of the project that you're working on, all the stacks, all the cards. And so here's the main window card. And something has me frozen that I can't click anything. Okay, the gremlins have struck again. Nothing, okay. Good. Am I still running code? I might be still running script.
No, command period sometimes gets you out of that.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to try something.
Hey, Martin, what's the window I see at the bottom that says, please select a LiveCode stack?
Oh, that might be the one. I can't see that one.
Oh, that's in Finder.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, there's an open.
I was trying to open, yeah, there's an open dialog box. That explains things. Doesn't like that at all. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. Okay.
Can I offer a LiveCode tip?
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you're doing this and you're trying to debug something, like you've loaded the browser window and you want to see what's going wrong, and you want to get into your script. Well, you know, of course, going to the pointer tool will unload the browser window. But if you are on a card and you're in the pointer tool, like if you select the pointer tool, sorry, that one, the browse tool I meant. And if you command option click on one of those buttons, hold down command and option and click on version check or that, any of them, that will bring up the script without stopping the stack. So it gives you a chance to go in and do your breakpoints without actually having to stop the code from running.
Okay. Yeah. And the one reason why, Yeah, so right now, none of these buttons have code in them because of another feature I'm taking advantage of in LiveCode. Well, it doesn't work for the stack, or for the card. Well, it does work for the card. Okay, let me just, okay, I know what's going on. Okay, first thing, I'm missing it, the stack's settings card behavior. So that's what I was trying to find, and I wanted to find out which one. So open stack. And I'll explain why this is just being a pain later. Okay. Right this way. Okay. So in each of these buttons, it's in the script isn't in the button anymore. It's down in the card but it's a behavior for the card. So that's sort of a relatively new feature of LiveCode. So I edit the behavior script of the card. And way down here I have the mouse up, so it's like the button, if you click mouse up, there's nothing to handle it in the button, so it drops down to the next level. In the card, it finds mouse up, so then it starts to handle that. And I'll put a breakpoint there, and then I've got to turn the debug mode on, which I turned off because I thought that was making my finger beep, beep, beep. Okay, so now when I click get product versions, I'll do that one. It drops down. And then I start stepping through. And so it says, if the short name of the target is the short name of this card of me, then exit mouse up. Now, this basically means is whatever I clicked on is the target. And the short name is just that name, get product versions. But if I click on the card, the short name of the target will be the card, which is also the name of me. So then don't bother going anywhere, I don't want to do anything. And if I jump down one more, it's the switch statement. So this says, and I mean, I don't know the level of programming that people have, but a switch basically just says, here's a value, and then there's different cases. So if your value matches any of the cases, do what's inside the case. So the button I clicked on was get product versions. So it goes to the case get project versions, so that equals that. And so therefore it runs get product versions. When it does that, so now we're into the command get product versions. It puts a URL, a part of the URL, into field request, which already has that. And then set the highlighted button of group HTTP method. So this is basically just setting which one of these is going to be highlighted. And so it's get, which it already is. And then I'm putting empty into these two fields, the data and response, just in case there's already data there. And then I'm not going to go through this whole LTI get versions one all the way through, but I'll jump into it and then jump back out of it. Oh no, I will. Never mind. So basically this is an LTI command that you use to just find out, before you even connect to LTI, you have to figure out which versions it supports. So you have to send this request endpoint. That's the HTTPS, the host name, and that all together and make a URL. So another nice thing about LiveCode is that it's really good at concatenating text and parsing text and doing all kinds of fun things with text. So I put that into the variable T request. And so you can see what that is. And then I put the HTTPS : / and concatenates the host name of the stack, which is a variable that is another variable that's somewhere in the stack, and then the T request. And that creates this URL, which I can also see down here. So it's https devcop.brightspace.com/d2l/api/version/ and so as soon as now this put URL, SURL, that's actually sending a request to the web page. So that just calls on LiveCode's innate, like it's basically like a GET request. It's just that's the one command that you have to do. And so when I jump through that one, T response is a really big JSON object. Well, not that big, but as you can see, it's all listed across there. Because when I hover over any variable, it will show me the value of the variable. Or I can open it up here, T response, double click it. It doesn't wrap, but now what we're going to do is we're going to turn that into an array. So there's a command JSON to array. And so now I can look at what the array is here. So if I was troubleshooting, I could say, okay, am I getting any the values? Where are they? And now I can jump back out of this command. And so I'm just going to put this back into JSON and put it in the field response. And I'm also going to just populate the request URL into that request URL field.
Is an SURL just using HTTPS?
No, SURL, I'm using a convention. That's called a script local, I think. And where is SURL? So I'm going to just find SURL. Okay, so I'm saying get the SURL of stack, this library stack.
Oh, okay, so you're storing it local to the script.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm storing it in another script, and then I'm getting it so that I can plug it into this, plug it back into this field so that the person can see what the full request URL was, and then what the response was. So here's a JSON object that says, these are the different products that you can contact at the Brightspace, the D2L Desire to Learn site. And so there's BAS, EFP, different ones. The one I want is LTI, but I could like search. I want to find out the latest version, but this one has another function and I won't do all the tracing through it. But so it says enter the version code, but I want LTI. And it says 1.3 is the latest version. So all it does now is it retrieves something from the internet. It's in the format of, sorry, my brain is just shocked today. It's in JSON, but it's also in an array. So that when I'm searching for it, I'm searching the array, which LiveCode has ways to do. So that's that's basically the idea of how you would do something like sending something to a website, right? So if you wanted to, it's put URL and then whatever that full qualified URL is, and that sends the request off, and that request comes right back and it gets put into a variable. And then you can then use that variable however you want. So that's just a basic run through of what I've done. So any questions about that? Or? And so the basic intent there was just to show you that it can be fairly simple about the language, that's how it's written. Like the statements are fairly understandable in English. You could go through someone else's code and figure out what's going on. You can step through code and then say, okay, what happened here? Why did this change? Or if it's not working, you can say, this is supposed to be a variable and my variable is empty. So back up a few steps and see where that went wrong. So those are features I find really helpful for me when I'm doing work in LiveCode. But so HyperCard was very simple, and LiveCode can work just as simply, but then people can say, let's just make this as complex as we can. Because so the viewer is the format that I'm using. How do I find my way to that? I'll just show you in the project browser. No, that's more complex. Sorry. Here, I'll let you, I just have to search my folders, and once I'm under stress, I'm going to be slow. So Brian, if you want to take over while I back and search around, and then I'll show you what the actual structure is for this. But I wanted just to start at the highest level of this little process, so I could sort of keep it simplified and then ignore the man behind the curtain as he smartly switches it in. Okay, and I'll stop sharing, and then if you want, I can share that later to show you that other part of it. Oops, I found it.
That was quick.
As soon as I feel like I'm not on pressure, it's like, oh, here's the idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I show you that just a second?
Go ahead.
Okay. Back to screen share. Sorry, I don't know why I'm having stress problems. Okay. So this is the folder that contains that little application. And so it uses a framework called the Viewer, which is created by a LiveCode developer extraordinaire, Trevor DeVore. And so he's done different things that he then just puts out to the community. And one of them is the Viewer. And it's a framework for developing applications that have a lot of the things that you need in a proper desktop application pre-built, ready to go. So you just have to take advantage of it. So he has like things like saving the, like packaging the application up properly. I haven't installed many libraries or anything like that. This is just the rough structure. But if you like, you're setting preferences within your application so that it does it properly on Windows opposed to Mac, it does all of that. It handles builds, it handles all that kind of things. Yeah, preferences helpers, although they are libraries. So it's, and the other thing, it's got this whole folder structure so that you place things in the right place. But when you're developing it, you really don't deal with anything except there's my main Windows script. There's the settings card that I was working with. There's the request card. And the nice thing about doing it this way is it's in an actual text file. LiveCode stacks, the HyperCard stacks were binary stacks, so you couldn't open them and edit them unless you were using HyperCard. LiveCode did the same thing until version 8 when they started to do these. So I can open up a request card behavior and use a text editor like TextMate, and I've got my same script, so I could go through and use the text editor to edit. Text editors have a lot more powerful features sometimes than the LiveCode script editor, and there's also sometimes there's problems with the script editor. So you can use this, and then the other thing is these are you can take advantage of GitHub or that kind of version control management system. So when I make an update to the to this and push it up to the GitHub, then it gets incorporated in. Other people can see it. Other people can branch off their version of it, work on their part of the project, and then branch it back in. So, and they can use either LiveCode or they can use their favorite script editor to do the programming. So that's the advantage of using that framework. So if we want to develop this up to a full application, a lot of the end work is done. You're just focusing on these few stacks that you're editing, and yeah, basically these 4 stacks are all you're really doing, but all of these other parts are just parts of the application that you would have to develop yourself to try and get, working properly as a standalone desktop in that app. And we do have, so I uploaded this just to get our GitHub thing started, so you could go in and then see what state the code's at. You could fork it, make a change, put it back in, and that maybe another time we could do that as a demonstration of how that works. Okay, so that's it.
So I'm putting the URL for our GitHub link into chat. And our meeting time is down under 6 minutes. And I'm going to make a quick share and go out and show you that page. Hopefully you're seeing my share now. So basically the page that I'm on, Team xAPI GitHub, is part of xAPI cohort in their Teams area. And this is where we need to do our updates. So if you scroll down, you'll see the first meeting we held. You'll see a link to the YouTube videos. If you haven't seen these yet, it's a good place to catch up. We had another meeting on the 10th. And then the xAPI-in-Livecode library that Martin just showed to you, the project that he showed to you, I made a video on uploading it into the GitHub. So there's information in that video if you want to understand GitHub a little better, or if you want to see how to get started with that Levere application, this video is a good place to start. At the end of this meeting, I'm going to take the recording and publish it up into here and put another update. And this will actually be the update that is, I believe, presented next week in the Thursday session. So the idea is, as we do team updates in here, they are pulled into the URL that they shared with us during the cohort, xapicohort.com/teams, plural, will get you to a page that shows all the active teams. for spring 2021, and our latest update is pulled into that, so they can sort of review progress.
When I tried the link that you gave, it tells me it gives me a 404 error, and I can't see any differences between the text you gave us and the page you're looking at.
The challenge is, I should have started with this, but I apologize. Because it's part of the xAPI cohort, and we're one of their teams, you actually need to register for the xAPI cohort and get access through that to their GitHub for the cohort to see the pages. So you're, again, because you're coming to us from the LiveCode side and not the xAPI cohort side, you're not already registered as a member of that. You need to register with them, with the cohort, to make that happen. My apologies. So that registration link is xapicohort.com. And then the other thing to be aware of is once I'm in here on this discussions tab, which is where this link points to, if I click into repositories, you can actually see a list of repositories. Right now there's only one. This is the project that Martin just discussed. But as we complete code for other LiveCode projects, the one that I presented will likely be the next file that's up there, we'll create another repository, and those files are downloadable and usable within LiveCode Community or one of the other versions of LiveCode. And once you click on that repository, you're taken to a different URL, and you're able to either download the code from the zip file drop down here, or in this case, you can download this zip file that we've published. Now, the reason I would recommend this is this Levure application actually has requirements for some of the folders that are empty just as a basic structure, and this zip file is a good place to start. So we're down to less than a minute on our last on this meeting. So I wanted to sort of get a feeling for our people wanting to go on another few minutes. We've actually scheduled through the 4:30. If you want, we can do another in and out exercise and come back in.
I should probably do some work, I think. So I'll see you next time.
Okay. Thanks for sticking with us.
Sure.
Helen, Joan, Kevin, do you have other questions you want to get to?
No, this was great. And Brian, if you think that the notes that I took on the last two recordings, that has a list of all the different places where you have the technology guide, and
oh, awesome.
So that's in there, and that's out.
So those are up in Slack. If you haven't joined the cohort, you can get access to that by joining the cohort and get access to our Slack channel for the team. Sorry to cut you off. We're short on time.
That's okay.
I will repost those into the GitHub. But again, both the Slack and the GitHub, you need to be part of the cohort. So Kevin, are you signed up through the cohort?
I thought I was, but I guess I'm not, because I got the 404, but I thought I did.
Well, you may not have it. You may be signed up and not have access to GitHub. My apologies, it just cut us off.